days. That's next to nothing, all right? Now, in the course of 2011, that's 60 business days that we have left for all of 2011. So part of what we're going to be talking about today, and the way it kind of ties in, is something that some of you all might have gotten from me, depending on what avenue that you receive my information from, if you're signed up for my newsletters and such or not. But the point of the story is I'm recognizing that right now we're currently worldwide, I mean, for all the countries that are represented out there, worldwide, we're currently experiencing the most uncertain business environment, at least of our lifetimes. And nobody seems to know what's going to happen next. And the so-called economic experts that are out there are pretty much leaving us in limbo. Every other word from them is unforeseen or not foreseen, or they didn't know what was going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. What we need to do is figure out how we can end our sales year with a bang and get a jump on next year. So here's what's going to happen. I'm not going to stand idly by waiting for disaster to strike, or conversely, I'm not going to hope for the magical unicorns to come down and deliver us from business Armageddon. I am certainly not going to let you twist in the winds of anything going on out there. Everybody that's part of this webinar that gets information from me, I view as part of the Matrix family, and I will not let you go by the wayside. So here's my promise to you. From October 3rd, which is the start of the fourth quarter, because end of the month is Friday, and then first and second are Saturday and Sunday. So October 3rd, which is Monday, to December 31st, there are 12 weeks and 57 business days. Every week you'll receive one touch from me, with a minimum of 5 actionable ideas every week. That's at least 60 in total actionable ideas that are specifically targeted to either close business right now or will help you get a fast start on your new sales year, or as I like to call it, end strong and start large. There was something that back when I was in college that we talked about, and it was real simple. It was called the fourth quarter. Now, you might say, well, gosh, John, don't we have that now, fourth quarter in business? Well, I'm talking about this in terms of football. I play football at my local high school here in Cleveland, Ohio, St. Ed's, and then I also went to Kent State University and played football. And in both places, and virtually every place I've ever heard, one of the big slogans that they have that's a chant that gets them motivated is, fourth quarter is ours. That means all the conditioning, all the working out that they do, everything that they go in, the blood, the sweat, and the tears, it's all about that fourth quarter. That's why they put in that hard work, so that they can lay it on the line in that fourth quarter. And I'm telling you, that's exactly what we're going to do in this fourth quarter. So, folks, the fourth quarter is ours. I promise you the fourth quarter will be ours. Now, along these lines, just so you know, momentum is huge, meaning, the more we can get rocking and rolling, the more we can close in the fourth quarter, the better our January is going to be, no question about that. But I just want to be clear about something too. I'm concerned with all companies making as many sales as they possibly can, regardless of what day it is, or what month it is, or what quarter it is. I believe that the more you understand what creates the pressure, the easier it will be for you as a professional salesperson to both avoid it and to conquer it. And that's what the main motivating factor of End Strong, Start Large is. So the question is, January 3rd starts 2012. Where will you be? How will you finish up that year? And more importantly, how are you going to start off 2012? All right, moving on. Let's talk about some webinar how-tos for everybody out there. Right now, let me just double check here. Right now I'm showing we have about 270 some people online at various stages here. All right, so let's talk about the webinar how-tos and what to expect and what you can do here going forward. First of all, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. You can hear us, but we can't hear you, okay? So you'll be hearing us as we go throughout this, but we can't hear you. So what you're going to need to do is raise a question, or you can chat over. All you've got to do is go to your box on your right-hand part of your screen and chat over a message, or raise your hand in the question, and things will come over. Already we do got one question here, and somebody says that, are you presently a slide? All they can see, and see, there you go. So somebody had an issue that they couldn't see the presentation. So you can't ask me a question. Let's put that out there. Can you guys see the presentation now? Everybody should be able to see it. There shouldn't be an issue. Yep, okay, I got it. Yep. 50 yeps coming over all at once here. 50 yeps, 57 yeps. Okay. So I think everybody's got it now. If anybody's got an issue, please let me know. Okay. Please let me know. Also, so if anybody missed the slide, everybody will be getting a copy of the presentation too. So don't worry about that. We'll make sure you get that as well. Also, like I said, I stay in the webinar typically anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour after asking additional questions, as well as through Twitter at #3C4Sales. Okay, 3C4Sales. So, that having been said, before I get started, any questions on webinar how-tos, on where we're going, or anything like that? Anybody got any questions along those lines that I can answer for you? Anybody? 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 Patrick, any lines from you? John, do I see that you're online finally?
Yes.
John Van Aken, everybody. This is John Van Aken, and to remind you real quick, he's a sales expert from Sold Lab, and John will be jumping in and talking to us a little bit. John, we'd like to say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. You can hear me, right?
Absolutely. So you know we've got 11 countries are represented, and just a shade under 300 people are on the line right now, John.
That's cool. Anybody out there from Russia besides me?
Let's see, as it comes over. I don't see anybody right now. Nobody's chatting anything over right this second. I know we had a few signed up from Russia. I don't know if they're actually on. But John, just so you know, we were just going through the webinar how-tos, and we're going to kind of jump into it and get rocking and rolling. You all ready?
I'm ready to help out any way I can.
Way to go. Okay. So first, before we get too deep into the weeds here, let's remind you of our friends who are going to help us out. These guys are the Best Practice League. For returning guests who have been here before, you've recognized these folks. These are the folks who practice the top 7% of all business practices out there. And they're the folks who are going to help guide us along as we go today and get us through some of the rough spots. Up top, you have Matrix Man. And just so you know, he was modeled after me back in the day. I still got the abs, but other than that. And then from left to right, we've got our friend Urgent. Then we've got the sales coach, and then over in the middle in the blue, we've got timetable, we've got the question, we've got gauge, and then finally contact. All of them have their own specific areas of excellence when it comes to sales and business practice, and we'll point those out as they go. And just like any good superhero team, you can't have a superhero team without having their own supervillains. And these guys have their own supervillains, and those folks are Mob, the Masters of Bad Business, headed up on top there by Dr. Know-It-All. He's a guy who thinks he knows everything out there, and we all know somebody like that. And from left to right, we've got Master Manipulator. We've got the Time Thief. And it's funny, there's somebody else there. Well, what is Timetable doing there? Well, maybe we'll hear about that, why he's actually in the bad guys here for today. Then we've got Disogre, the king of disorganization. And then finally, over to the far right, we've got Mr. Presentation. And Mr. Presentation will definitely be making his self known today in the course of today's conversation. All right. So let's jump right into the C's, okay? Remember the C's: communication, commoditization, and conversion. First C up is communication, and the question is what is communication really about? All right? What lies at the heart of communication? And that's what we're going to jump into right now. What lies at the heart of communication? First up, though, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of define communication a little bit, all right, just so everybody's on the same page. There's, of course, visual and graphic communication. There's nonverbal, there's verbal, there's written communication. And at this point, I'm going to ask Patrick Jeber to jump in because his mastery over the communication aspect of things to kind of jump in and give us a little bit of a snapshot on communication and how he sees it in the selling process.
Thanks, John. Well, we look at the visuals you present. Are you there?
Yep, I'm there.
Oh, okay. The visuals you present your customers are extremely important because they're an extension of your brand, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't just think of visual communications as visual. Sometimes you think of them as a total sensory collaboration. Mm-hmm. Depending on your product or service, you might consider the audio on your website as a way to visually communicate, because you're immersing your customer in the experience of the visit, or let's say the smell in a storefront to entice them to come in further. So all these things combined are visual communication, right? They fall into that same category. But no matter how many ways that you combine your visual communications, it's important that you present them consistently. And that's what we're always preaching to our clients, is consistency. It allows your customer base to become more comfortable with your brand, and it builds that blanket of security in a way where customers know what to expect from you. And you're building that trust all the time through visual communications, ultimately building value out of the relationship with them. So it all starts how you visually communicate, right? We always ask our clients, how do customers perceive you? Does your customer communicate well, or does your brand communicate well to your customers? Does it communicate the right message? So when we're talking about that consistency, you also want to look at, are you communicating effectively? Are you communicating the right message? And it reminds me of when we were talking about this topic earlier, John, it reminded me of a few years ago we were working with a custom cabinetry business, and we were helping them rebrand. And
Creative Kitchens.
Yeah, and when we first met with the owner, I remember asking them, how do you perceive your business? And immediately most people will have an answer, and his was, well, we look at ourselves as a high-end, sophisticated custom cabinet maker. And that came right off the tip of his tongue, because that's how he wanted to present himself. But when we asked him to describe the brand as it was before we rebranded it, his answer was completely the opposite. And that's the point of visual communications. Every piece of your brand, no matter it's the logo, if it's the shirts that your employees wear, whatever it is, your website, social media initiatives, they should all visually communicate the consistent and effective message.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you, I got a question from Sarah that just came in, Patrick.
Yeah.
Along those lines, okay. So everything's got to convey that message then. So how do you achieve a balance? This is from Sarah. How do you achieve a balance between the visual and the written then? Is there a key there? Is there something, how do you do that?
Well, really, whenever we're looking at a brand in its entirety, right, we're writing the message to be synonymous with the visuals, right? I mean, you have to look at what is the ultimate goal of your brand, and then write everything to really support that, because everything written should support it, whether you're talking about a sophistication or if you're talking about simplicity in a brand. You basically want one to support the other. So I don't know if that helps answer that question, but
no, I think that's got that.
We customize it so the written should support the visual and vice versa.
Gotcha. And what we're basically saying, these are the ways that we, as the picture, the way we touch our suspects, prospects, and customers. You can never go wrong by putting a picture of a puppy in there, can you? These are the ways that we reach out and we touch them, whether it be visual, graphic, nonverbal, verbal, and written. And give you a couple more examples on how we reach out and kind of talk to a little bit more about what Patrick was saying there. Here are some of the reasons that we touch our customers. Some of the other reasons we touch our customers. We've got a new or updated product or service, a new marketing strategy, industry news or trends, performance of existing content, acquisition of a new target market, new budget cycle. Now, from what Patrick was going to there is everything's got to be in balance from both the visual and the written going forward from they see these things. But the question that I have, to you, Patrick, is as you see these things, new or updated, new marketing strategy, are these the end-all, be-all of ways that we could reach out and touch folks, whether it be visually, graphic, written, or whatever, or are there other ways too?
Well, I mean, every single piece, every single time that you communicate with a customer is another way that you have a chance to impact them with your brand, whether it's over the phone, through the mail, whether you're driving the company truck and your license plate is falling off or there's scratches and dents, all of those things actually.
Sure.
Is that kind of what you were looking at?
Yeah, it was, because it reminds me of the story of Harvey Mackay. If anybody knows Harvey Mackay, he wrote one of the premier business books in the 80s called How to Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive, and his name of his company was called the Mackay Envelope Company. And one day he was looking out his office window, and this is one of my favorite stories. He was looking out his office window, and he looked down. And what he was looking down at, he's in Minneapolis, by the way. He looked down. He could see the top of all these trucks, all these white trucks. And he's like, I wonder how many other business executives look down at the top of the trucks. So he started putting advertisement or branding. At that time it wasn't called branding, back in the late 80s, or was it, Patrick? I don't think it was. He started putting advertisements.
Wasn't widely used then.
No, not a whole lot. And he started putting advertisement, the Mackay Envelope Company was the name of his company, Mackay Envelope Company, with all the contact information right on top of his truck. So as trucks were driving through the city, dropping things off, people could look down and see it. So, that kind of ties that together. Like you said, everything, every touch, every look, every whatever it is, that qualifies as a touch. This is only, pretty much, oh, and by the way, this the graph that you guys see here is from Marketing Sherpa. This only qualifies as what people actually talk to, but the way you've got to think about your communication is it's everything that they see, hear, taste, smell, you name it, that's a touch from folks. Would I be correct in that, Patrick? What do you think?
Yes.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. It's always nice to be correct. Thank you, Patrick. All right, so here is our problem. Here is our problem in a nutshell, all right? We see our little picture over here. We've got a brain, we've got 2 ears, we've got 2 eyes, and we've got 1 mouth. But we never use these things in proportion, do we? All right? And I like to use this. Everybody's heard the 2 ears and 1 mouth situation for communication. And they say, oh gosh, listen twice as much as you talk. But here's another thing that they don't think about. You should look and experience and visualize twice as much as you talk. And you should be thinking about the things that you're hearing and seeing before you talk. You combine that together, you've got 5 things that should happen before you actually talk, before you actually communicate, all right? But we know that that doesn't happen here. We know that that doesn't happen. So the question is, in communication, what our real problem is, we go to what is communication really about? What lies at the heart of communication? And it's as simple as understanding. The reason why we have a hard time with communication, particularly in business, is because understanding we're too concerned about getting our name out there. We're too concerned about getting out what we do, how we do it, what's important about us, and not as worried about the customer. So one of the first things that can derail you as a salesperson, as a business person, is communication. And the thing that's going to derail you in this is not seeking to understand. As the one of my favorite adages goes, seek first to understand and then to be understood. We've got to understand what's going on out there. We've got to know what they're thinking, what their perception of things are before we open our yap. We've got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and a brain. We should activate all 5 of those things before our mouth even opens. And what it boils down to, if you're going to take it and boil it down to one solitary thought, is this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If we're that typical sales rep, that typical person who goes out there and, like Mr. Presentation down there, all he does is start talking and yapping about what he does, and he's got graphic files to show, and he's got a real cool presentation and laminate this, and he wants to do a demo of that. All right? If that's who we are, we're not going to communicate with people. We need to be more like the question. Ask more questions. Or as I like to say to folks, I promise you, and this is from experience. And John, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong here, because you're out there doing the same thing as me on a daily basis. I promise you, you will never get kicked out of an office for asking too many questions, but you will get kicked out of an office if all you're doing is talking about yourself or talking about your product. It's just the way it works. You've got to ask more questions than you actually talk. John, I'm sorry, I walked over you there. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. And if you don't mind, I want to chime in on something here, if that's
Please.
okay. Real quick.
Absolutely.
I think also something that's important with communication is, in reference to the understanding part, is understand that every customer is different, and the way that we have to actually form our communication is different. What I mean by that is that I know all salespeople have heard, well, you got to create your 30-second commercial. Well, that's not really true. I mean, it's not really relevant. I would say it like this: you need to create a number of 30-second commercials. And what I mean is, for those of you that aren't familiar with me, which is probably most of you, I reorganize companies in the former Soviet Union and around the world, outside of the United States. And most of the time when I'm doing a reorganization project, I'm selling to an owner of a company. However, to make sure that my deal stays closed and to make sure that I get paid out, that means that I have to play a little bit of politics, and I usually have to get the approval of usually a financial director or maybe a commercial director, sales director, and probably usually an IT director and HR director. Now, I'm going to communicate to all of them in a little bit different way because all of them have a different agenda. They have different benefits that are important to them. Of course, I'm closing the top guy, but if I use the same type of communication strategy and approach, i.e. my 30-second commercial at the most basic level, with the director, which really cares about the results, or and other people have different cares and needs and desires, I'm going to miss my clients. And so I guess the thing I wanted to impress upon everybody is that the understanding goes far beyond you just understanding the situation around you. You've really got to understand that every type of customer is going to be different, and if you don't communicate in their language, you're going to miss it.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. One of my favorite shows that have ever been is Star Trek, and I like all versions of it. Star Trek: The Next Generation is one of my favorites. And there was a great episode where Picard, who was the captain, was trapped on a planet with an alien, and they were standing across from each other, and they had to figure out how to communicate. And it was as simple as, the alien was holding up a cup to Picard and saying something, and Picard had to guess, did that mean fill up the cup? I should do what? I mean, what was it? And it's all about that perception of everybody speaks a little bit differently. And John, I think you're particularly in tune to this because of the fact that you've been doing the selling in emerging markets. And it makes you even that more in tune. That's why I think you're the insight you're bringing here is right on board. To kind of wrap up for this one piece in terms of communication, just so you guys know, this is only the beginning. Obviously, we opened up the acorn with this. So the October 19th webinar, the next webinar that we've got going, we're going to be digging into communication, a much bigger deal. Patrick's going to be a much bigger part of that, obviously, because we're going to be talking about brandscaping, lead generation, proposals, my CTS system or continuous touch system, all that type of stuff at the October 19th webinar, where all we're digging into is customer communication and how to that and going into much more detail. So in case there are questions that come up, and I see that there have been a few, just so you know, we're going to go into a lot of this more as we go through here. All right, before we move on, anybody else got any questions, or panel, anybody else got anything you want to add? Okay, let's keep it rocking and rolling. Patrick, I'm sorry I walked on you there. You good?
That's okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Next up, how and why do products/services get commoditized? And we all know, what products are considered commodities out there, milk or, a calculator or a cell phone or bread, and you can even up it to, electronics. All right. One of our customers, actually, Patrick, one of our mutual customers was an electronics distributor, and that's very much viewed as a commodity. But getting commoditized is something that happens over time. It's not something that happens right away. And first, what I want to do is kind of dig into this a little bit and talk about how does something get commoditized. Well, the first, most simple way it gets commoditized is advancing technology. To your left there, you have the ENIAC computer, one of the first computers ever with the crystal tubes, and whenever there was replacing a bad tube, he had to go through 19, that guy right there, it was the tube replacer, he had to go through all 19,000, just like the old times with your Christmas lights. Whenever one light would go bad, you have to go through the entire string. That's how it was with that first computer. And then over to the right, you got something more from the late 70s, early 80s type of a computer. And of course, we know now we've got computers that are the size of our palm that we use. They're called iPhones, okay, or Androids or whatever. And then down below, of course, we got the old horse and carriage, that was removed with, the car and Henry Ford. And advancing technology is always going to commoditize things, okay? It's just the way it goes. But as business people, as salespeople, there's nothing we can do to do that. We can only embrace that, because that just means we've got more and different things to sell. But it is something we had to address. So, advancing technology is one of the things. However, what we're about to talk about is the real problem with commoditization, and that is everything that's poor. Okay, first there you have in the middle, you got sales coach, and sales coach may have a smile on his face, but that smile is pain right now because he's not very happy with these poor things that happen that help to commoditize somebody's product or service. And first up, we've got communication. Your communication is poor. Well, yep, guess what? You're going to start to commoditize your product. But let's set that aside because we've already talked about that a little bit. Okay, next up from there, we've got professional selling skills. Okay, your professional sales skills. If your professional sales skills are poor, we're going to dig into this a little bit, then your odds are you're going to start to commoditize things as well. Next, trend perception. Can you perceive trends that are going on? If you can, if you don't know where things are going, well, guess what? You're going to wind up having a commoditized product as well. Market intelligence. Are you finding out what's out there, what your competitors doing, what's buying, what's selling, what's not buying, what's not selling? All right. If you're not doing that, be prepared for a commoditized product. Are you continuously touching your customer? Are you continually touching your customer? If you're not staying in constant contact with them and getting in communication, finding out what's going on, I promise you, you will start to commoditize yourself and your product or service. And then finally, perfect is the mortal enemy of productive. Now you might say, oh gosh, John, it doesn't go with poor, and yes, I understand that. But that is still something that commoditizes your product. What I mean by that when I say perfect is the mortal enemy of productive, what I'm trying to say is when we worry about being too perfect, having everything just so, having all our paperwork in terms of doing some type of outreach to customers just exactly perfect before we start doing something, and as a result we lose time because we say, well, I don't want something to go out to the customer until I have it exactly just so. I'm telling you, that's the enemy of being productive. You got to have things right. You got to have things precise. You got to have things, as Patrick would tell you, the brand, the visual has to match the written, but things don't necessarily have to be perfect. There are so few things in this world that are perfect. But what we'll do is we'll use that as an excuse not to get something out, or not to make the next phone call, or not to go on the next appointment because we don't have everything just so. Don't. Perfect is the mortal enemy of productive. Now, there's a reason why I moved everything over to this one side and put it over to professional sales skills and everything underneath it. Because in my estimation, professional selling skills are the key here to the commoditization. And you can even put communication under that, because we can't stop advancing technology. Just can't do it. Okay. Our President Barack Obama, has a problem with automatic teller machines and the fact that they're putting bankers out of work. Well, that's advancing technology. That's never going to happen. We're never going to stop that. But the things that we can control, we've got to control. All right. And these are some of the things that we can control. And let's add to some of these in the professional selling skills. And it's something that I notice all the time. And John, feel free to jump in at any time here. When salespeople don't protect their own assets, like their time, like their knowledge, like their resources, like their relationships, so what happens is they lose control. They devalue their position. When salespeople rely on feature and benefit selling to differentiate themselves, but what happens is it produces the exact opposite effect. Or when salespeople aren't keenly aware of a customer's buying process, which is designed to defeat them. Do you guys understand that a customer's buying process is designed to extract every piece of information out of you and then to send you on your way and let them make a decision without you being involved? It's designed to defeat you. And then finally, a lack of an overall disciplined selling process, all right? Something that differentiates you from everybody else. Is there a way that you go through your daily work, what you do from the time that you wake up to the time you go to sleep? Is there a disciplined way that you go about things? John, in terms of professional selling skills, anything else that you know of that you run across helps or lends to the process of commoditization of your product or service?
Well, yeah. I think that in today's world, as a salesperson or any kind of professional, you have to really stand out as a brand. And I think that too many salespeople are really irrelevant in their profession because, let's think about how we look for information today. Most people Google something. whether it's an individual, a company, a product, a service, whatever it is that they're going to get information about. I mean, they're going to go to Google first. And what's going to come up on Google? Wikipedia, Facebook, other social networks. And I meet so many, LinkedIn, of course. I meet so many salespeople that when I start talking to them about being a brand themselves, they look at me like I'm nuts. Now, in the world that I live in, I mean, I've created myself into a brand in emerging markets. And I got to tell you this, when you're perceived as someone that is a brand, meaning someone that stands out from everybody else, whether it's through something you've done or something you're doing, whether it's a book you wrote or a blog that you write on every day. Or,
could it be like sales coach in the best practice league, John?
It could be exactly like sales coach, no question about it. I mean, that's a very good example. The characters that you created is something definitely different. Absolutely. I just came back from the National Speakers Association convention, and my Russian staff that came along with me, we were exhibiting at the booth. They started the exhibition one day before I got there, and I called them. And I was in Northern California at the time. I said, what do the participants look like? They said, well, I hate to say it, but it looks like a bunch of 1980s game show hosts. I said, what do you mean? He said that it's the way that they're dressed and the way that they look and the way that they talk. And if you look like everybody else, guess what you're going to get? You're going to be stuck in the middle. I mean, unless you can be the guy that's really cheap or the guy that's really, really expensive, you're in the middle, man. And if you look like everybody else, nobody's going to pay you any attention. When I go to meet with clients, and understand, again, when I'm contacted to come and do a reorganization project, I mean, here's me, just John, hanging out against people like McKinsey or Bain or these other big, expensive, high-power consulting firms, and I come in as a brand, as somebody that's different, and I come up alongside the decision maker and say, look, I've been there, I've done that. I understand what you're doing, I'm a business owner too. And when I'm talking to top people, they automatically resonate with that because I'm talking to them again. It comes back to communication, the way that I need to communicate with them. But I stand out from everybody else. And if you don't start thinking of yourself as a brand, well, then ask yourself this question. Why would anyone give you, or better yet, trust you with money?
Yeah. That's very true. And I mean, the way I always like to look at it is it can be the way you look, it can be what you do, but it's got to be something that differentiates yourself. Now, in the sales world, what I always find, and John, again, tell me, what your experience is if it's a little bit different. People who, one of the simplest way you can differentiate yourself and brand yourself is the guy who asks the most questions, the guy who learns the most, the guy who's most interested in your customer's business. That's a simple way to do that, and that falls directly under the level of professional selling skills. Now, obviously, there are a lot more things to get into, when it comes to this, and, that is something we're going to go to. And again, this commoditization, this is a much, much, much bigger topic, and this is going to be our topic in our November webinar that we're going to dig into it a lot deeper. But I think, this little insight right here, you guys are seeing, when I say you guys, I'm talking to the folks out in the audience, you're seeing that if you don't find a way to do that, and as John's saying, either you're the highest price or lowest price, well, guess what? Lowest price, that takes us right back into that commodity zone again. We don't want to do that. Either one or the other, and all of a sudden you're just part of the crowd. So we're going to get into that in a lot more detail and dig into it and figure a lot more of these things out. But I think you guys can see if these things don't happen, if we continue to have poor selling skills, poor trend perception, market intelligence, continue customer touching, if we continue just to try and get everything perfect before we do anything, that's what's going to happen. We're going to commoditize our product, and poor coach over there, he's not going to be happy with the whole thing in the slightest. All right, moving along. Let's get to the next C in our list. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Sorry to jump in there. Let me make one more comment. You said about asking questions. Absolutely. That definitely differentiates you in the eyes of most of the decision makers you're going to meet, because most salespeople are schleps when they come to this. They read some cheesy sales book that was written in the 1980s that's totally irrelevant today, and they ask these goofy questions about things that really don't matter. And the questions definitely differentiate you, but I want to emphasize something that I think is relevant. It's the type of question that you ask also where they lead. I personally believe that, you know, the recession that I believe we're still in, I don't think we've gotten out of it by any means. You know, people are talking about double dip. Well, I know a lot of people that are already double dipped, okay, in a lot of markets around the world. And the relevance in most people's mind if they're making a decision is the results. And, you know, results again comes down to different things for different people. It's, as I mentioned before, depending on who the decision maker is or who's involved with the decision, they're looking for different results. But there's something about talking about results, especially now, because I've found that even if companies don't have budget, which of course they always do, they just won't give it to you. You know, if you talk to them about what you can provide them in terms of results that will drive their business forward or help them individually or whatever it is, real results, not activity, results, that's something that's really seen as a differentiation, because now you're not a salesperson. You're a partner.
Yes.
And when you're a partner, you get a whole different level of reception, different level of respect, and you make a whole lot more money.
John, are you looking at my notes? I mean, you're in Moscow right now. It's 9 o'clock at night. I mean, are you looking at some wormhole at my notes over here? Because that's exactly where I was going to go next.
Wormhole.
Wormhole.
I watched a Borg episode last night with my wife. I in preparation for this.
There you go. Yeah, you had to keep up with the references. But yeah, you're exactly right, John. And you know the next step to here where we're going to go next is into the conversion process. And when we get here and we start talking about what short circuits conversion throughout the selling process, one of the things, you know, that I talk about is the difference between a salesperson and a business person. It's funny, I was out at a company just this week. It's a pretty large car dealership here in town, and everybody knows what their opinion of car salespeople are. And when I was talking to them, when you talk about results, John, I was asking them, you know, what is it that they're looking to get out? They go, well, we definitely don't want car salespeople. I go, so are you looking for sales professionals or business people? He goes, well, we'd settle for professional salespeople, but we want business people. And then when I defined it out a little bit more, they said, oh no, business people, because they're the people who sit on the same side of the table with the customer and co-create a sale instead of trying forcing something down somebody's throat. But you're exactly right. And that is something that comes out in the conversion process here. All right. Now, helping us out in the conversion process, we've got here today, we've got Gage and we've got Urgent. And, you know, we're Urgent, he's one of our favorites because he's always pushing things along, moving it forward. And Gage always helps to let us know exactly where it's at. And when things short circuit, nobody's better to have around than Gage. So what we want to go through now is what is the, you know, really let's define what conversion is and then see exactly what it is that short circuits the conversion process throughout the selling cycle. Okay, first of all, let's define it. Conversion is the ongoing progression of the selling cycle from the simplest, most basic task to the most complex. All right, so I don't care if it's something as simple as a web hit to follow-up, a follow-up to a nurtured lead to qualified lead, a qualified lead to initial live contact, an initial live contact to discovery, a discovery to presentation, presentation to close to a first customer satisfaction meeting. All of those are conversions, okay? All of those are moving things along, okay? And that's the whole idea. One of the things I talk about with SOVNOP, the linear, not logical selling process, is following a logical procession, meaning sales isn't linear. It's not step 1, step 2, step 3. Something can go from a web hit to an initial live contact to a discovery to a presentation to a close. You could skip 4 steps in there. But the trick is are things converting? Are things progressing? Are things moving forward? I've got a question from Erica Harris in Alabama here. Erica asks, is this a standard sales process or a standard sales cycle, these 8 different steps? And Erica, I have to tell you, these are really examples. This isn't standard per se. These are examples of what it is. And as John was saying, you know, talking about knowing, you know, your customer, right now there's a couple hundred of you out there. And to know what each one of your selling processes or selling cycles look like, that would be very, very difficult to know. I don't know what your selling cycle should look like or does look like. These are some examples of what it could look like. The trick is to understand that conversion is about progression. It's about moving things forward, taking it from step 1 to step 2. All right. So if that's what conversion is, what short circuits it. Well, first of all, obviously communication and commoditization. Okay, now we have there, to help illustrate this, we have the master manipulator. Now he thinks that anything he says, anything he does, he can twist and turn to make the customer see things his way. But as Patrick told you, in communication, if your visual and your verbal are off, you've got conflicting message. And as John was saying with the commoditization, if you're not listening, if you're not asking questions, if you're not talking about results, you can commoditize yourself very simply. So when those things don't happen, remember earlier I talked about how these things are going to start to line up like dominoes. Okay, communication doesn't happen, commoditization doesn't happen, pretty soon conversion doesn't happen. All right, what short circuits conversion overall is a real lack of effective selling process. All right, now you have up there, SOVNOP, sell on value, not on price. And what I'm talking about there is this, folks. So many times we think that we know exactly what we're doing. We think, oh, all I got to do is get that lead, run out there, let me talk to the customer and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't work like that. You've got to know what the next step should be when you're sitting down in front of the customer. You've got to have a plan in mind. Now, there's a line to walk there too, okay? And what I mean by that is you can't be so linear that you're what I call an agenda-driven salesperson, that all you do is you look at what's going on and say, I got to get to this step. That's where I got to go next, all right? Or you can't be that person who tries to jump in line too much either. You got to be that person who looks at things and say, okay, off of this appointment, off of this phone call, these are the multiple things that can happen. The only way you can do that is have a real selling process. To have sat down, boy, good grammar there, John, to have sat down and wrote out exactly what are the steps that happen in your particular selling cycle to your particular market, and then what are the potential things that can happen off that. Think of it like a tree, okay? If this happens, then that. If that happens, then this. If that happens, then that. Let me give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about here. Let's say, you're on the phone with somebody, okay, and the purpose of that first phone call, let's say it's after that first follow-up and they've contacted the website, and so you're following up and you're finding out a little bit of information about them. And what you try to do is close them over the phone for either to sell them something right then and there, or even just trying to get an appointment right then and there. And you might say, well, gosh, John, isn't that what we're supposed to do? You talked about progression and conversion. Yes, but I talked about correct progression and conversion, meaning if you're talking to the person for the first time live, the odds that you're going to be able to sell something to them, unless your product is so inexpensive, unless you're selling something like that's really a commodity, unless you're selling something so inexpensive, well, maybe you could do that. But for most people, and the people that are in the line, as I notice, the people who sign up for this, they don't sell that. Their service or product that they sell are generally between $10,000 and $100,000. You're not going to sell something over the phone like that, but you will ruin the possibility of sitting down by the person by trying to do too much too soon. Another situation that can happen by not having a selling process is your failure to nurture leads, okay? You might fail because you're impatient, you might fail because you're bored, or just from sheer laziness. Any one of those is just a big, 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 hairy problem, all right? You've got to nurture the leads. Just because a lead come in doesn't mean that it's ready to sell right this second. You're going to have to stay in contact with it, or the CTS, which we're going to talk about when we talk about communication next month. The point of the story is you can't give up on that because you never know what could happen down the road, but you won't ever know if you don't stay in contact. Lack of proper qualification, John touched on that. Asking the right questions. It's not just about asking questions, it's about asking the right questions. Or no understanding of relevancy, consistency, and timing. No understanding of what's relevant to the customer. How many times have you seen poor sales reps get out there and just talk about things that the customer does not give a rat's fart about? Just yak, 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 and it doesn't really matter to them. Or consistency, that's part of the staying in touch, or the timing, hitting them at different times that based on your research of them and your time with them, when's the best time to reach them. We're all in different industries, folks, so we all have different industry timings. Some people, it's best to reach them in the first quarter. Some people, it's best in the last quarter. In America, for example, with the government, if anybody sells to the government in America, the best time to start, to really ramp up your selling efforts is the beginning of the year. Or we might say, well, gosh, John, don't things turn over at the beginning of the year? No. The process for buying and things actually start up the official budget process starts in October. So you start at the beginning of the year, then you've got 9 to 10 months to build your case to be selling something to the U.S. government. That way, by the time you get to August, September, October, they're ready to make a decision on you. And every customer is different. They all have their different timings, all right? There's also something else here I want to talk about. There's a reason why I picked the book Moneyball to give away today, and we'll talk about that here in a second. It's because Moneyball, if you guys know it, now it's a major motion picture starring Brad Pitt. It's out there, right now. It's just released in America. But to boil it right down, it was about the Oakland A's, and the Oakland A's is a baseball team in America. And what they did was they hired a general manager who decided to turn everything on its edge and change the way teams went after players and figured out how to run and stock their teams with the best available talent. What this guy did, his name was Billy Beane, he figured out the inefficiencies in baseball. All right. For example, he found out that batting average wasn't as important as on-base percentage. You might say, well, gosh, John, what's the difference between the two? Somebody might not know baseball. Batting average is simply the number of, hits that you get. On-base percentage is the number of time that you actually reach base. So which one would you rather have, a guy with a high batting average or a guy with a higher on-base percentage? Billy Beane theorized correctly, I might say, that you should have a person with a higher on-base percentage because that person's got a better chance of scoring the more he's on base, and so on and so on. He also figured out what he should be measuring. What's he working on? And he took the inefficiencies out of the process and streamlined it. Now, like anything else, once you streamline it and your secret goes out, then it comes down to the people with the most money. So you're still going to have, players, teams like New York, Boston, and stuff that's still going to succeed as long as they're working the process. But that's the thing. He forced teams like Boston and New York that have virtual vaults of money to throw at players to accept and run by the same premise. Otherwise, they were going to get run out of the business. And it's been a fantastic success ever since. And a lot of teams have even created their own software along those lines. And that's the same thing in the selling process. We've got to find where the inefficiencies are. What are we measuring? Are we doing things the wrong way? Are we not attacking things? And sometimes it's simple as, it's looking at, what about this phone call? What are we doing on this appointment? And it might be something that we've done for 1,000 years, okay, or your company's done for 1,000 years and is a sacred cow, but you've got to look at it, and maybe it's time to turn it on its ear and look at it a little bit different way. Is it linear or is it logical? Does it make sense? All right, I got a question from David Gabolt from Utah. David says, how can you determine the inefficiencies in a sales organization considering that there can be hundreds of possible permutations that happen? David, that's a fantastic question. All right, fantastic question. The only way that you can do this is look at what's working and what's not. All right, and what I mean by that is you've got to see where you're succeeding. You've got to know what your numbers are. Let's look at the basics here. Let's say you get 15 leads that come in, David, okay? And all those leads have been qualified and they're ready for a phone call. So now you get on the phone and you make that phone call. How many of those leads turn into an appointment for you? Then after that, okay, let's say you got a high number there. So let's say a lot of those leads turn into appointment. Fantastic. So we know you're good on the phone. Now let's say your discovery appointment. How many of those discovery appointments turn into a presentation? All right. Well, maybe that number is a little bit lower. So that tells me maybe, like John was saying, maybe your questions aren't as good as somebody else's questions, so you're not going far enough in the process. They're not getting you to the presentation, and so on and so on and so on. And I can continue to give you examples like this. But the only way you can do it is by to measure exactly what's going on in your everyday work. John, do you got anything to throw in here?
Yeah, I do. To me, the easiest way to find out the inefficiencies, and you used the process, I guess, the prospecting example in the front end of the sales process. But if you really want to find out how to be able to sell faster, how to be able to sell for more money, how to be able to close bigger deals, okay, this is going to seem really simple, but why don't you ask your customers? Now, I'll say this to salespeople, and they're like, well, yeah, duh, but the salespeople don't do that. Why? Salespeople have the wrong mentality. Go back to the idea of being the business person versus the salesperson. What do salespeople think about? Salespeople think about trying to close a deal. What do business people think about? They're thinking about problem, solution, ultimately ending in results. And I will tell you this. Some of the clients that I service here in Russia are real billionaires. Okay, and somebody asked me one time in a seminar, well, are you ever afraid to talk to a billionaire? And my answer was, of course not. And this is a couple hundred people in the seminar, and the guy stands back up, and Russians can be kind of provocative when they ask questions. He said, come on, you're not telling the truth. I said, of course I'm telling the truth. I'm going to prove it to you. When I sit down with a client, my number one goal is I'm not thinking about the commission. I'm not thinking about the money. I am thinking about whether or not I can help them solve a problem. If I believe that I can, I definitely have more power than they do because we're talking about their problem and I have the solution. And if they realize that I'm there to talk about solving a problem and I can help them solve a problem, now they trust me. Furthermore, if they trust me enough to give me their money, what do you think, and also, and this is important, not only do they trust me enough to give me their money, but they have also accepted the fact that I have given them a solution, i.e., I have helped them get something, whether it's a specific benefit or whether it's a specific result, whether it's saving money, losing money, whatever it is, or stop losing money, I should say. Do you think if I ask them for some help, because I have that trust, because I've helped them solve a problem, do you think they're going to help me? Every time I ask a customer for help after I close them, they're like, John, sure, of course. Let's go have dinner. Let's go have a drink. Let's go to a club. What can I do? And I'll ask them, okay, look, in your industry, I'm trying to be able to get a couple other clients. Tell me, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? How can I fast track my process? Well, John, you cannot do this. You wasted time doing that. You shouldn't have talked to this person. You should have gone directly to me. And they will lay out for you what you can do to be relevant. And one other comment, if I could tag this in, I think this is so important now because, and I don't want to sound like the doom and gloomer, but I really do believe we're going to hit the skids in terms of the economic situation, and it's going to be, for, I mean, especially relevant for salespeople before the end of next year. Now, if I'm right, what I'm about to say is really important. Companies right now are changing so fast that for most salespeople, the market research that they're getting from their research departments that usually takes a couple of months to be able to farm out and collect and gather and analyze, by the time it comes back to the salesperson, it's already out of date because companies have to change their buying process. So the only way you're going to be relevant and really understand how to be on top of the process is by asking the one person that really knows what the heck is going on, and that's the customer.
That's a good point, and I think you're exactly right. I think people, it's either they're afraid or they're like, gosh, I can't do it. It shows fear, it shows weakness, it shows this, but the customer's going to tell you, and the customer's going to know more often than not exactly what the situation is. Why not ask them? And like you said, from where you're at. When I say where you're at, meaning where you're located, nothing like a blunt answer to find out exactly what's going on, or a blunt question to find out exactly what's going on.
Yeah, but John, let me jump back in and say one other thing. You brought up fear. Excuse me. Salespeople are afraid to ask customers for help. Furthermore, they're afraid to ask customers for referrals.
Yep.
This is something that had plagued me for the first 10 years of my sales career. Why is it that salespeople have been told in every seminar, webinar, every book ever written on sales to gather referrals? To the point where, look, if you gather referrals, you knucklehead salesperson, you're going to have to cold call them. All right? So why... I'm sorry, I'm blind.
No.
Working in emerging markets is pretty. It's straightforward. I mean, it's unforgiving in emerging markets. But anyway, we've all been told this. Why is it then that salespeople don't ask for referrals? Why do I own my own companies? Why do I yell at my salespeople, guys? Why don't you go get referrals? And then it dawned on me probably 10 years ago. The reason salespeople don't do that and they don't ask their customers for help is they're afraid.
Yep.
Why are they afraid? Simple. Because they were focused on trying to close the sale and make the money rather than solve the problem.
Yep. And they want to get out of there so fast that they don't want the customer to change their mind.
Which I can't understand for the life of me. If you're solving a problem, they're going to ask you to solve another one.
Yeah, and I think you're right on with that. And as we get into more into conversion and commoditization, that kind of insight's going to really knock it around a little bit more. Jacob, you've got a big question there. Jacob Balanzogwag. Jacob B. I apologize. I'm just going to call you Jacob B. I apologize for that. Your question is, I find that sometimes it's difficult to help my team understand how to make the question-making process natural. Sometimes they force the conversation. How do you recommend coaching these kinds of salespeople? Jacob, that's a big question, and if you can hang out after for a couple minutes, and we will answer that for you. But that's a really good one. But I want to make sure we get through the rest of the topic material. Dan Mitchell, I see that you also got a question. How do you get to the billionaire? That's going to be for John. John will also get to that, after we finish up here. And then Bob Vokey, yes, to answer your question, his question is this concept called earning the sale? Would you call it earning the? Yes, that's what you're doing. You're trying to earn the sale the right way by doing the right things, but in the shortest, simplest way. Yes, Mr. Vokey, that's exactly correct. But Dan and Jacob, we'll get to your questions because those are a little bit bigger, as soon as we're done with the material, the big presentation here. All right. So in terms of conversion then, that's what we're talking about. It's a lack of a real effective selling process, and these are things that can happen. And now the question is where do we go from here? And that's really the biggest question, all right? We've identified the 3 C's, communication. We have identified commoditization and conversion as being issues. So where do we go from here? Well, that's a little bit more about the end strong, start large, okay? Just to give you a little bit more detail about that, as you guys have seen here today with Patrick and John, I'm going to be teaming with other sales and marketing experts from across the country and literally the world to bring the information and resources you need that's going to help you control your sales destiny. You're going to be getting webinar information, articles, videos, white paper, lunch and learns, you name it. We are going to make it available to you. If you have a specific need or want, please email me. Let me know what it is. No excuses, folks. We're in this thing together. And as John said, it's very likely that we're either we're heading for a double dip, or we haven't got out of that recession and it's only going to get worse. And if that's the case, we've got to be in this thing together. So no excuses. We're going to be proactive. We're going to make our year end with a burst and bubble over our success into 2012. And I'm here to tell you, you're not alone. There are people out there that will help you do this. We're going to do this together. We will succeed. We're all committed to your success, and I'm not going to let you fail. All you have to do is meet us halfway, and we're going to do everything in our power, and I hope that you do everything in your power to move things forward. We're going to continue digging into the 3 C's. We're going to be looking at these things more as we go through here. And to give you an example, as we go forward, in the next topic, when we dig into communication and Patrick gets into it, we're going to be talking about things that are going to have much more detail than today. Today we open up the can of worms. We're going to start to answer those questions that we opened up. I also want you to keep this in mind too. There are no easy answers. All right. The ideas that we're covering will help you for all 4 quarters, not just the first quarter, second, third, quarter, or whatever, but they all require work on your part, hard work, very hard work. The result, though, I promise, will be success. Big success, very, very, very big success. All right. Let's kind of wrap up here, and then we'll get back to the questions. First off, John, this is for you here. John Sold Magazine, I have to tell you, this is one of my favorite publications, as well as the publication that helps me most when I've got a question, I'm trying to figure things out. I go right to Sold Magazine, particularly because I had the article printed just in September. That article was really good, though, John. You should have read it. It was excellent. I mean, it was fantastic. But anyways, point of the story is Sold Magazine is a fantastic resource for you. All you got to do is click on www.soldlab.com/subscribe to get your free subscription. It's got all the information that you need, and also as you go to that website, you go to soldlab.com, John's got a ton of great resources there for you. All types of experts from all over the world that can give you the information you need to move things forward. John, do you have anything else you want to talk about Sold Lab while we have the screen up here?
Well, just I mean, there's no strings attached to it. It's one of my I wouldn't call it a venture capital project. It's more of just something I wanted to do because I really do believe that salespeople need relevant information. You can subscribe to the magazine for free, and if you're on Facebook, definitely friend us so that we can get more friends and we look more cool, and enjoy it, and send us questions. We try to answer as many of the questions that we get as we possibly can. So that's pretty much it.
Absolutely. And also, too, make sure that you visit Monsters Unlimited. Patrick, if you'd like to throw out your website.
Yeah, you can go to our websites, thinkmonsters.com, as in, do you need marketing? Do you need results? Think Monsters. So
Lots of cool stuff on there too. Patrick's got a lot, a lot of cool videos, a lot of interesting things that'll make you think. But the thing that he does best is they'll make you think in business-specific ways. Not just something that looks cool, but something that looks cool that, as John would tell you, also brings results, which is the most important thing. All right, a little bit of house cleaning. Winner of Moneyball by Michael Lewis is Teddy Covey of Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati. Teddy, congratulations. You are the winner of Moneyball. Please, you can chat over, tell me how great I am that you won that book. Everybody loves the book, so I know you will too, and I'll give you something to talk about when you go to the movie. Winner of Best Question today has to go to Jacob. Jacob, your question is fantastic. I've got to give that to you. Out of the 15 or 16 questions we got today so far, you get the best question. And winner of Most Participative is, let me count up all the hands raised and questions. Winners of the Most Participative will be Merrick Solangi from Croatia. Merrick, congratulations, winner of Most Participative. Both the winner of Best Question and Most Participative gets 1 free hour of time with me over the phone. You can use that hour however you want. If you have a sales team that you want me to do a webinar for, personalized for your group, I will do that. If you want to go and just dig through the sales process, figure things out, we can do that too. Whatever it is, 1 free hour of my time, telephonically or in person, we'll work it out, the details, and I'll get you guys and let you know exactly what's going on and how we'll satisfy you. Teddy, I will get your Moneyball. We'll get put in the mail tomorrow. You should have it at the latest by Friday. Send it UPS. Next up is, as the year goes on and we're looking for ideas and things on how to move our sales forward, consider a sit blitz, folks. I'm telling you, no faster way. Sales is like lightning. No faster way to start closing sales than to do a blitz, and no better blitz in the world than the sit blitz from Matrix Impact. Also, check me out at the fantastic sales forum, matriximpact.com/SFFSF, with all the latest information and articles. And, please feel free to keep on going to Twitter at the hashmark 3C4Sales. And finally, folks, this. You can either make sales or make excuses, but you can't do both. But I've got one more quote for you in terms of, in what we're looking at in the fourth quarter. It's from Henry David Thoreau. If one advances confidently in the direction of his own dreams and endeavors to live the life that he has imagined, he will meet with success, unexpected and common hours. Folks, all we've got to do is start moving the needle. You're going to have a team behind you to help you, but we need your help too. Meet us halfway, and we will get to the goal line. That's it for the formal portion today. Now we'll do some question and answer. Okay. Jacob, first up. Okay. Jacob's question. I find sometimes it's difficult to help my team understand how to make the question-making process natural. Sometimes they force the conversation. How do you recommend coaching these kinds of salespeople? John, I'll start off, and then I'll let you jump in. Jacob, my take on this is this. Okay. If you've got a team that's very, mechanical, and they don't make it natural, there's only one thing you can do. Practice, 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 practice. And when we practice, I call it simulation. You've got to make everything as real as possible. You've got to take real-life objections and things that you hear from the customer and integrate that into your simulations. You've got to do this on a minimum on a weekly basis. Now, I don't know how many salespeople you have, Jacob, but you should be riding with your reps or going out, and if it's an inside sales position, listening to your reps a minimum of 1 time a week, depending on the number of folks that you have. But you've got to be going out with these people, finding what's going on, and then having weekly sales meetings and doing these simulations. Make it fun, too. Person who does the best simulation, person who closes, you're going to have to create some of these things, and this might be something that you can spend your hour on with me to figure out how to do this. But the only thing that makes these things more natural is practice. Practice, practice, practice. And I've got to assume if you're their boss that you know how to do it fairly well. The best way to do it is show them how you do it. You do the first couple simulations. Let them see how good you are at asking questions and how you take people down the road. And then document all those questions that you ask. Put them down, and then make those the questions that everybody else should ask, and then allow them to go and feed off of that. Salespeople are generally very creative. If you give them some direction, they can fly and go off of that. But the trick is giving somewhere to start. That's the hardest part with salespeople, is getting them that foothold to get things started. Okay? But simulation, simulation, simulation. Practice, practice, practice. That's how you do it. John, do you have any input for Jacob on that?
Yeah. Can you ask Jacob, because I can't see the response to this question, What is he selling, and who is he selling it to? Like,
Well, he can hear you. Jacob, can you chat that over or send that over in a question? What are you selling and who are you selling to? He said sure. He's going to chat it over. He's sending it over as we speak. Do 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 do. All right. He's selling software, portals, and payment systems to the multifamily housing industry.
Multifamily housing industry. So is it B2B?
Jacob,
Is that what we're
B2B?
talking about?
Apartment management companies. Yes, B2B.
Okay. All right. I would approach it like this. Questions, of course, have to be natural. It can't be like, you know, you're doing some sort of CIA interrogation. And what I teach my salespeople is this: is once they sit down with the customer, and, you know, after you go through the pleasantries and after you do the handshake and all that kind of thing, you sit down with the customer. I teach my salespeople to do two things. To say two general things. First of all is, you know, Mr. Customer, before we even get into this, I want to let you know that I'm not even sure if I can help you. I'm going to see if we can try. I'm not sure. You know, I've done a little due diligence about your company, your situation, but I just want to let you know that I'm not here to push you to do something you don't want to do. I'm not here to sell you. If you buy something, that's your fault, not mine. And usually they'll laugh or they'll smile a little bit. Second thing I'll do is I'll say, to be able to understand your situation and really see if I can help you, and I'm emphasizing this word help, because everybody likes help.
Yep.
That's non-evasive. That's non-threatening. If I'm going to be able to help you, I'm going to want to ask you a few questions. Is that okay? 99.999% of people will say, yeah, sure, no problem. What I've done now is I've asked permission to probe, and I have essentially not opened up the refrigerator without asking permission. Okay, and because, you know, if you start asking questions and you don't ask permission, it can seem a little bit rude and kind of intrusive to a lot of people.
Sure.
Now, if I have done a little bit of due diligence about the customer before I get there, then what I'll usually do is I'll say, well, I don't want to waste your time. Let me confirm what I understand the situation to be or what I already know. And I'll say, well, you know, your company does this, you do that, here's your revenue, here's this, here's that. Did I get that correct? And usually then they'll say, yeah, but you missed this, or you know, we don't have 27 units, we have 15, we have you know, 29 units, and then they'll start to talk. And I mean, I've been teaching this to my salespeople for years, and the same type of general approach works and transcends across nationalities too.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think the mistake that a lot of sales teams get into is they think, well, I've got to have special questions that only work in my industry. Well, you have to have special things logistic-wise. You've got to know the vocabulary of your industry, but the basic questions are the same, whether the country, the product, whatever. And it's like you said before, John, it's about the results. It's about helping them. And I particularly like, you know, the take that you have on there where you're asking them for permission, because then, you know, you're moving ahead at their own steam, not just forcing yourself down their throat. Jacob, how's that do? Does it help you out there? So I'm going to move on to the next question if it does, unless you have another one.
John, can we do the billionaire question, because then I'm actually having a lot of fun, but I need to scoot because I actually have a seminar I got to do tomorrow, and I need to do some prep work.
Okay, and just so you guys know, it's about 11 o'clock where he's at, so he's got prep work to do, just to get the gist. Okay, okay, and he says sure. Dan Mitchell, his question is, how do you get to the billionaire? Jump in, John. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, you come to Moscow because there's more billionaires in Moscow than almost any city in the world. That'd be my first comment. But really, I think you're talking about trying to get to affluent people. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's what I think he means.
Okay, well, the first way to meet rich people is to go where rich people go and do what rich people do. I mean, for example, I fly business class because I can afford it, but also I've learned that usually if I'm flying business class, the guy sitting next to me, there's a good chance that he has enough money to buy something I got. Not only that, I'll meet people in the business class lounge. It's the sports club you go to. It's the restaurants you go to. You know, one place that I've made a fortune in my career is just in hotel lobby bars. And I don't drink much, but I travel a lot. So I'll go down, I'll order a club sandwich or something. You know, I'm sitting in the bar and, you know, people are talking it up and, you know, you make eye contact with somebody or, you know, they make a joke, you laugh, you make a little side comment, oh, good joke, you know, and then they...
It's 23 hours.
Sorry, that was my Apple computer talking. But, you know, you got to go where they go and hang out where they go. And I'll tell you something that I've learned. And I say this because pretty much all of my clients, well, all of my clients are multimillionaires, centimillionaires or billionaires, because my rates are pretty high. So they have to have a big enough company to afford, you know, my company services. And millionaires rich people are normal people. You know, there's this stigma like, oh, somebody's really rich and, you know, they drive around in, an Aston Martin all the time or they have a limousine or they may have those things from time to time, but they're normal people. You know, when they run out of sugar, you know what they do? They run out of the house in their sweats and they run down to the grocery store and they go in the line and they buy it.
They don't have a great sugar-making machine in their apartment?
They do not have a great sugar-making machine in their apartment and they don't send out staff to go get it, probably.
Interesting.
That's the case. They're at Starbucks. You know, I mean, they're normal people. A place I've cut a lot of deals is meeting people at my son's private school. You know, when there's a, you know, like a kids Olympics or, you know, the kids are doing a sports activity or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You go along on a Saturday or in an afternoon one day and guess what? All the dads are there.
Yep.
Guess what all the dads are talking about when their son isn't doing something? They're talking on their mobile phone or they're talking to the other dads. You know, but there's something else too that I would suggest. Rather than where you find a billionaire or a millionaire, here's the bigger question. Are you thinking like a billionaire or millionaire? Quick example, quick story. I think everybody knows who Tony Robbins is. I think everybody knows who Mark Victor Hansen is. If you don't, he's the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And Mark tells this story much better than I do. But basically the gist of the story is Mark and Tony will be backstage waiting to speak at some big event. It was the first time Mark Victor Hansen had ever met Tony Robbins. And so they introduced each other, and, oh, hey, you're the Tony, you know, the firewalking guy, that's Tony Robbins, and, oh, you're the chicken soup guy. So they started talking for a few minutes. And Mark thinks, well, you know, I got to ask Tony the big question. And this was back when Mark was charging about $50,000 a day to speak. And Tony was charging about $250,000. So Mark says, you know, Tony, I got to ask you a question. You know, don't take this the wrong way, but, you know, I mean, we both kind of do the same thing. We speak. You know, we're both pretty well known. Tony, I got to ask you, how do you charge $250,000? How do you get it? And so Tony says, well, you know, Mark, you know, I do this and that. And Tony asks Mark a question. He says, who is it that's in your mastermind group? Tell me about it. A mastermind group is the group of people that, you know, you spend time with, bouncing ideas off and learning from. You know, and so Mark starts to explain the different people in his mastermind group. And he said, well, Mark, tell me, what is this common thread with everybody in the group? Do they have any similarities? And Mark says, oh, yeah, they do. And he was thinking this is such a great answer. He said, well, they're all millionaires. Tony doesn't even breathe. He immediately shoots back a response. Well, Mark, there's your problem. Mark doesn't really understand. He said, Tony, how can it be a problem that everybody in my mastermind group is a millionaire? He said, well, you asked me how to make $250,000 a day. Mark, everybody in my mastermind group is a billionaire. Now, something to take into consideration. Another quote, because I know John likes quotes. The founder of IBM said that if we're ever, and Thomas Watson said that if we're ever going to be a great company, a big company, we have to start thinking like a great company, a big company first.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be around millionaires, you need to start acting like one and thinking like one. Millionaires think differently than average people. And you can even extrapolate this down to business people or entrepreneurs even think differently. You start thinking more like that, I guarantee you're going to come up with a whole lot of answers to be able to find those rich people in wherever it is you live.
And I think that's so true, John. And I think one of the things that hampers folks so often is you get into that, that daily routine of, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and the only answer to that, when people say, well, gosh, John, how do I, talk like them? How do I find these things? You've got to make the time. You've got to find the time. There's no other way of doing it. And I wish there was a magic wand that I could wave and make something happen and tell you that there's some magic formula that would allow you to find these folks, but there's not. You've got to do what you got to do to close business every day, up and down the street, and then you've got to continue to find these folks that go out there. Where do they hang out? What do they do? And like John said, I mean, they're just normal folks. They just they do things that everybody else does, but they do think differently. And the reason why they think differently is they're exposed to so much information that's out there. The other thing that we get into as salespeople, getting into that daily rut, we get in that. We get up early, do our thing, come home, take care of stuff. You've got to make time to read. You've got to make time to write. There's nothing that opens up your mind more than and clarifies your thoughts more than writing what you believe, particularly when we're talking about business, about sales, about marketing. Write it down. It's nothing that has to be published per se. Write it down. What's your philosophy? What do you like? What do you think's right? Read a book. Pick up and if you guys know me, I've got more than enough books. If you guys got a question for a book, let me know. Okay, there's a book every month that we talk about, but First Break All the Rules, Top Selling, Top Grading, Spin Selling, Quantum Leap Thinking, NLP at Work, The Fifth Discipline, Differentiate or Die, How Customers Think, and on Primal Leadership. The Power of Wow from Tom Peters. Just let me know. I will throw out ideas to you. But you've got to find time to read. You got to find time to write. And it may be late at night, okay? Maybe late at night when you're doing it because you got no other time. Or it might be you got to get up a little bit earlier. But find time to read stuff that's out there. Find time to write what your philosophy on sales and how things should go. That's what makes you start thinking differently. Because then you start questioning yourself. What about this? What about that? What about this? And that's how entrepreneurs think. They're thinking, what's the next step? Where should I go here? What should I do next? And start thinking like them. Put yourself on their same wavelength, and it's going to make it easier. Then you start having conversations, and bang. And we're all salespeople, folks. That means that we should be fairly decent conversationalists. All right. You add that little dimension on top of it, and you got something to go on there. All right. Dan, does that pretty much? Go ahead.
I got to run.
Okay, John, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you back in November when we talk about commoditization. Thanks for coming, John.
Pleasure. I hope you all have a good night. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. We've got a question in from Brian Salva. Brian, by the way, how's Rebecca? Hope things are going well. Brian and I go back. That's great. Brian's question is, how do you grow your mastermind group? Well, you kind of heard some ideas from John there, okay, in terms of where you look and what you do. Some of the simple things that he does, like he says, flying business class. But then it's some of the other things, not just flying business class, but spending a couple extra bucks and getting in some of the different rewards clubs. So you're sitting in the rewards clubs if you're flying around, and that's where a lot of people that make money sit. Right, and then where they talk. And, what else is going to happen? They're sitting there having a drink, the libation, they're a little bit loose. Have a conversation with these folks. But John gave you a lot of good ideas there, Brian. Just look for the opportunities as they present themselves. There's nowhere there's a tag or a neon sign that says millionaires or billionaires here. There's nothing like that. What you've got to do is look for these places where these people, actually do their everyday life. And it's going to be things where you hang out in your everyday life too, and that's the neat thing, okay? Like you said, when you start having kids at the different schools, I mean, I know I met, when my young one went to a daycare to the Goddard School, I started meeting folks that I hadn't talked to before, and they're all folks, masters of the universe, in the greater Cleveland area here, people who ran their own companies, people who are heads of division. I was at Barnes & Noble one time with my little guy, and he was playing on the trains, and I got to talking to a guy next to me. He winds up, he runs a large pallet company. Next thing you know, we're talking and doing things. It's just one of those things. You just got to look for the opportunities as they present themselves. But the trick with opportunity is, Brian, is always being ready to grab it. The mistake that people make is they get crossed with opportunity and let it slip through their fingers. Because why? It's got to be perfect. Got to do this right. Just grab the damn thing and run with it. All right. Any other questions we got there? Good one. Dan? Oh, Dan left. Brian, anything else? Anybody else got anything? Brian, make sure you tell Rebecca we said hi, okay? All right, folks. We're going to wrap it up. We will be taking questions on Twitter still, so please feel free to go to Twitter. And just to remind you guys, the Twitter hashtag is hashtag 3Cs for sales. Hashtag 3Cs for sales. Look forward to doing that and hope things go well for you. But here's the thing. Don't just hope. Make it go well for you. You got a question, pick up the phone, email us, call us. We'll help you out. We look forward to seeing you in the next webinar and look forward to getting you started with End Strong and Start Large. Take care and have a great day. We are out of here.